reserved for Lady Zahra. Salamullahi alayha.
Allah.
Our loudest one from here, Abdullah al-Hussein. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين المصطفى حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على
وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. يا غريب كربلاء رزقنا الله في الدنيا زيارتكم وشفاعتكم في الدنيا والقبر والآخرة. أما بعد، يقول الله تبارك وتعالى في محكم كتابه وقرآنه المجيد وقوله الحق: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم تر إلى الذي حاج إبراهيم في ربه أن آتاه الله الملك إذ قال إبراهيم رب الذي يحيي ويميت قال أنا أحيي وأميت. قال إبراهيم فإن الله يأتي بالشمس من المشرق فأت بها من المغرب فبهت الذي كفر والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. أو كالذي مر على قرية وهي خاوية على عروشها قال أن يحيي هذه الله بعد موتها فأماته الله 100 عام ثم بعثه قال كم لبثت؟ قال لبثت يوما أو بعض يوم. قال بل لبثت 100 عام فانظر إلى طعامك وشرابك لم يتسنى وانظر إلى حمارك ولنجعلك آية للناس وانظر إلى العظام كيف ننشزها ثم نكسوها لحما. فلما تبين له قال أعلم أن الله على كل شيء قدير. وإذ قال إبراهيم رب أرني كيف تحيي الموتى قال أولم تؤمن قال بلى ولكن ليطمئن قلبي. قال فخذ 4 من الطير فصرهن إليك ثم اجعل على كل جبل منهن جزءا ثم ادعوهن يأتينك سعيا واعلم أن الله عزيز حكيم. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. أفلح من يصلي على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على
Respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Our discussions have entered into its third night on the theme of actionable Arbaeen steps. On our first night together, we talked about how Imam al-Zaman is using Arbaeen as a check to see if we are alive on the path or dead after 40 days after his grandfather al-Madhloom Sayyid al-Shuhada Abi Abdullah al-Hussein sallallahu alayhi was martyred. Yesterday we looked at some conversations that are common amongst the Shia community and that are really more of a detraction from where we should be focused and is not much use towards our time. Tonight I want to bring our discussions to a different level, and so I'm going to ask for your heightened attention because some of the concepts, while they're not hard, may be new and there are some fine points that need to be followed closely in order for us to reach our conclusion. At the outset, I recited a couple of ayat which follow Ayatul Kursi. Ayatul Kursi is, of course, in Surah Al-Baqarah. It starts with ayah number 255 and goes out of precaution up until 257. What happens directly after that? You see, the Quran is divided up into sections. It's not just jumbled up speech where we don't know where Allah is going next with His speech. There are sections, and there is a rhyme and reason of why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has switched from this topic to now this topic, and there is a theme within these few ayat. Ayatul Kursi itself, Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum, is the start of a section. And this section will be talking about life and death. And so the first ayah that I recited was about Prophet Ibrahim debating with a king who said, I can also give life and death. He says, okay, you think you can give life and death? Bring the sun which rises from the east and goes into the west. Make it rise from the west and go into the east. Then we see a prophet by the name of Uzair, or who is known as Uzair in our traditions, and he is passing by a city. This is also a biblical story. And it seems that 35,000 people had died in this city. And when he passed by it, he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he wasn't even asking Allah, he was just saying it to himself. These people, before they even died, they were already dead in their tracks spiritually. Meaning, how is Allah going to revive this community? Not just from what He's seen physically. That's one aspect. But the second aspect is, these people were very dead in their spirituality. They were Muslims in name only. Many of us know a few Muslims in name only. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides to make him an ayah himself, and He puts him to death for 100 years. He raises him up and he says, look at your food and look at your ride, your donkey. They have both done two different things. Your food has not aged, your donkey has aged 100 years. And then he raises the entire city in front of him. And of course he himself is raised. Then we come to the ayah which we will be focusing most of our discussion on tonight. And this ayah is quite misunderstood. In this ayah, Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam asks Allah, كيف تحيي الموتى? How do you bring the dead back to life? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks him a very interesting question. He says, أَوَلَمْ تُؤْمِنْ? Haven't you already believed? He says, yes. However, for the sake of my heart being in a state of itminan. The question should be at rest, basically. So he says, okay, take 4 birds and فَصُرْهُنَّ إِلَيْكَ. I won't translate that yet. And then put parts of them or portions of these onto different mountains, call them, and they will come to you. They will come running to you. Now, the popular understanding of this ayah is that Nabi Ibrahim cut up the birds. He put, let's say, as one tafsir will go and say, he put the heads on one mountain, the wings on another mountain, their feet on another mountain, and their torsos on another mountain or hill. And the way how it had worked was he had trained them, he had trained them to respond to his voice, right? And then he would call them and they would come to him. This is one interpretation. This is a popular interpretation. That doesn't mean that this is necessarily the only interpretation. Otherwise we wouldn't be here in this lecture analyzing this ayah. There's a second interpretation. One that fits more with the context of the ayahs. What context? First and foremost, these ayahs come after which pivotal ayahs that we all know in the Quran I just mentioned a few minutes ago? Ayatul Kursi. Ayatul Kursi starts off with Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum. La ta'khuduhu sinatun wa la nawm. Lahu ma fis samawati wa ma fil ard. So then when we read that Nabi Ibrahim is being challenged by a king, oh, your Lord can also kill and bring back to life? I can also do that too. And you guys know the famous story where he brings out 2 prisoners, he sets one free, says, look, I've given this one life. And he goes and takes this one and he says, I'm putting him to death. He says, see, I gave this one death. Nabi Ibrahim knows Ayatul Kursi a little bit better than you and I do. Even though it's not revealed at the time, but he knows the principles. What are the principles? Allahu la ilaha illa huwal hayyul qayyum. That's number 1. Okay, the king is he's challenging Hayyul Qayyum, right? What's the next of these statements that's applicable that he can challenge him on? Not La ta'khudhuhu sinatun wa la nawm. Lahu ma fis samawati wa ma fil ard. To him belongs everything in the heavens and everything in the earth. My master owns the sun. The sun will obey my true master. He makes it comes from the east, he makes it set in the west. If you are really, and look, the first time he says it, Ibrahim says, Rabbi. He says, I'm your master. He says, no. Okay, you want to play that game? Allah is the one who takes it from the east and sets it in the west. You think you're anywhere comparable? I challenge you now on point number 2 of Ayatul Kursi. Lahu ma fis samawati wa ma fil ard. Do it. Come on. فَبُهِتَ الَّذِي كَفَرَ. He was dumbfounded. He had no response. Wallahu la yahdi al-qawma al-kafirin. Allah does not guide the people who are kafir in their qawm. When this Nabi Ibrahim has such a good understanding of life and death, you agree, this is Nabi Ibrahim that we're talking about in this ayah, right? He's the one who's debating this king. He's the one who understands Ayatul Kursi much better than you and I do. On top of that, he has 2 very interesting phenomena that happened to him and no other prophet. First of all, he is given ijazah that he can be sarcastic. He can go and destroy their gods and say, it wasn't me. You think that the big one, he has powers, right? Go and ask him. Go ask the big one. And they're dumbfounded. They don't know what to say or do. What do they do when they are so flabbergasted that they cannot answer Ibrahim and defend their idols? What do? They throw him into the fire. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, saves him, makes the fire cool and safe for him. He stays in that, what looks like a fire from the outside. For him, it's a garden. He stays in there for a few days and then he comes out. He's not going to come out immediately and they're like, okay, well, fire won't work. Let's use a knife or something like that, right? No, he lets them all go. He lets the fire die down, and then he runs away. Not going to stay over here. They're after him. The other phenomena besides the fire is he has a son who he keeps seeing a dream about. And in this dream, he's slaughtering this son. But every time he tries to run the knife against this son's neck, what happens? Physics stops working and a sharp knife won't cut anymore because it obeys Allah. When you have Allah on your side, even physics will come to your aid. Fire will not burn and a knife will not cut. So now he's seen that in his own life experience, he has two very clear examples, very clear burhans and very clear hujjas, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is completely in control of life and death. Yes? Is this much established? Good. Then we come to this debate with the king. Ibrahim has a very good understanding of life and death, which now makes you ponder the question, later on in life, why is he now asking, كَيْفَ تُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى? How do you revive the dead? And Allah is asking him, you don't believe? What's going on over here? He says, no, but for the itminan of my qalb. Nabi Ibrahim has seen more of these miracles than you and I will ever see with regards to life and death. Yes or no? So then it doesn't make sense. Why is he asking this? Number two, which doesn't make sense in this ayah of كيف تحيي الموتى قال أولم تؤمن, is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding him to go and do to the birds. Because this is a little bit disturbing to even describe to kids. Yeah, Nabi Ibrahim, he just butchered some birds and then, there was no other way that Allah could have taught him. He couldn't have used someone who was already dead and just showed him. Couldn't have done that. People who are cremated, maybe their particles are everywhere, and then Allah shows kun fayakun, and He brings all the particles back together, and why not that? To understand what this second tafsir is saying about this ayah, we have to understand that Prophet Ibrahim salawatullah wasalam alayhi is the father of this religion. Millata abikum Ibrahim, Quran will say. We have to be on that path of Ibrahim. But which path? You see, there are two sons, famous sons at least, of the Prophet Ibrahim. Prophet Ismail and Prophet Ishaq. And so there are two legacies as well for Prophet Ibrahim. Now here's where I ask for your attention. Legacy number one goes with Prophet Ishaq. And that is where Prophet Ibrahim sees miracle after miracle after miracle. And truly, with regards to all of the prophets who were ever sent to Bani Israel, are there not miracles after miracles after miracles after miracles? In fact, the surah that this ayah is from, Surah Al-Baqarah, will list miracles shown to Bani Israel in the dozens. The mountain being raised over them, the sea splitting, right? The golden, the calf that was yellow, reviving someone who was dead. Many, many different miracles, mu'jizat, that were shown to Bani Israel. And yet, even with just a cursory reading of Bani Israel's account in Surah Al-Baqarah, did Bani Israel ever benefit from those miracles? Or did they become worse and worse and worse? Worse. And they're actually a role model in the negative direction.
Because I put it in hold mode.
We shouldn't ever become like that. Musa alayhi salam shows them so many miracles. A staff turning into a snake. The white hand that shines brighter than the sun. And yet it doesn't harm his hand and it doesn't harm any of their eyes when they're looking at it. Otherwise, if you look at the sun, won't it harm your eyes? If that much energy, that much nuclear energy is in your hand, won't it harm your hand? But there's no harm to Prophet Musa. Then when it comes to the plagues in Bani Israel, when it comes to Egypt, each of these are witnessed by Bani Israel. All the way up until they cross the sea, and yet what happens within 40 days? They take up a calf, As Musa is up there receiving laws and commandments from Allah, and they're over here putting their forehead to the ground in front of a idol. It gets all the way to the point where who is the final prophet sent to only Bani Israel? Prophet Isa alayhi salam. At the very end of Surah Al-Ma'idah, there's a very interesting exchange between Prophet Isa and the Hawariyun. What is this exchange? He has already told them that, look, my days are few. I'm not going to be here with you much longer. You will have many trials after me. And read history, what happens to the early Christians after Prophet Isa alayhi salam is no longer on earth? The Romans come, they torture them. Many of you have heard of the lion fights in the Colosseum. This is what the Muslims of that time had to do. Those were the followers of Prophet Isa alayhi salam. Those who were true on the faith. So he tells them these predictions, but they say, okay, we need to have something concrete. Can you ask your Lord to send down a table from the sky so we can have something physical, something that we ingested, something that we ate, such that when they're asking us to relinquish La ilaha illallah, we know we saw something come down from the heavens and we will never relinquish our faith. Prophet Isa alayhi salam has witnessed, and he knows the Torah and the Injil from birth. He knows the legacy of from Ishaq all the way to Yahya alayhi salam, and even himself. And he knows that the more miracles Allah shows, the less chances Allah gives. Look, if you don't see a miracle, can't Allah give you an excuse? Okay, you didn't see a miracle. But if you saw a miracle, you saw the sea split open, now what excuse do you have? Now if you still keep on sinning, now if you still keep on living the way that you were living, oh man, there's something really that's messed up now with you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prefers not to give miracles. But Bani Israel's prophets were allowed to go and give miracles. And this is even something that they were taught in the Old Testament, that the sign of a true prophet is that he will be able to perform miracles. Prophet Isa alayhi salam gives a very interesting response. You can open up Surah Al-Ma'idah for those of you who are interested. Where's the end? And what does he say? He says, fear Allah. Like, I've been teaching you about all of the prophets before me, Bani Israel, and how they asked and asked and asked, and then it didn't help them. Why are you asking for this? They're like, no, because we really need something that will cement our faith. He says, okay. He goes and asks Allah, give us a ma'idah from the heavens, so that this will become an Eid for us, for the first of us and for the last of us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives a very interesting response. He says, okay, I will. But if after this, anyone disbelieves, I myself will punish him personally with a punishment never before seen in humanity, never ever will it be seen in humanity, if we send down this miracle. Did the Ma'idah come or no? I told you that this is towards the end of Prophet Isa's life. There is a table spread, even in Christianity, where all of the disciples ate before Jesus goes. And you guys all know it as the Last Supper. That Last Supper happened on something called Maundy Thursday. What did Prophet Isa say in the Quran? تَكُونَ لَنَا عِيدًا لِأَوَّلِنَا وَآخِرِنَا. It would become an Eid, it would become a day of celebration for the first of us and the last of us. Do you know any Christian denomination that celebrates Maundy Thursday? Or do they celebrate the day after that, which is called Good Friday? Do they celebrate the Sunday right after that, which is called Easter Sunday? They don't celebrate it as an Eid anymore, do they? And yet, the miracle came, and Allah said, if I send this miracle, you are signing the contract that you agree to my terms and conditions. That if you disbelieve after this, I personally will come after you. That's legacy number one of Prophet Ibrahim, where there are witnessed miracles. The second legacy of Prophet Ibrahim comes through his second son, or actually his elder son, which is Prophet Ismail. The only prophet that we know of, possibly Prophet Shu'aib as well, The only prophet to come from the line of Prophet Ismail is our Prophet Khatam al-Anbiya wal-Mursaleen, Muhammad ibn Abdullah salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. Brothers and sisters, this is not a salawat befitting of Rasulullah. Another second louder salawat. This legacy, also a legacy of Prophet Ibrahim, is what this ayah, second tafsir, posits as its hypothesis. What is this theory? We have established that Prophet Ibrahim knows life and death and can prove it to a non-believing king and convince him in a debate. He's not convinced about life and death? Doesn't make sense. So now, what's going on? See, this is a human tendency. And Prophet Ibrahim asks, because just like any human, we also might ask questions like, if Shi'ism is really right, where is it written in the Quran? Remember, we mentioned this yesterday. Is there an ayah that just spells it out that Shi'ism is the Sirat al-Mustaqim? No, because you have to use your aql a little bit, right? So then, if that's the case, then what exactly is happening over here? He's asking because he still wants something more. He is exhibiting something human. Where when we see something, we want to see, a little bit more. Just to be sure that we're really on the right path. How many miracles do we see on a day-to-day basis? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has enumerated many signs for us in the Quran. That the tree that you see, for example, is an ayah. Why? The grass, the plants that you see growing, especially over here where there's a winter, you see it go through a life cycle. You see it die when it comes to fall and winter, and then you see it. What has happened to it? What happens to it when it comes to the spring? It comes back, doesn't it? And then Allah says, كَذَلِكَ يُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى. This is how Allah will also revive the dead. But every time now that you see grass after those frigid winters, may Allah save us all from those winters. Every time that now you see a plant grow back, that is now an ayah, that is a hujjah on you, that look, just like how this came back to life, you too will come back just like this from the ground, and Allah will bring you back to life. If He can do it for plants every year, He can't do it for you. He created you the first time. What's to stop Him doing it a second time? With grass, with flowers, with trees, He does it like how many times? 150 times? Some of these trees grow to be 150 years old. He can't do it once with you. When there are signs like this, that a tree, for example, gives shade to anybody who wants it, maybe I should be giving shade and comfort to anybody who asks it from me, whether they're Muslim or not Muslim, whether they're my brother in faith or whether they're not. After all, it is Amir al-Mu'mineen who says that a person is either your equal in humanity or your brother in faith. Right? When you start to see the entire universe as signs around you, you're now on that path of Nabi Ibrahim. وَكَذَلِكَ نُرِيَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مَلَكُوتُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَلِيَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُوقِنِينَ. Surah Al-An'am. This is how we showed Ibrahim the behind-the-scenes engineering blueprint of everything in the universe. And everything here in the universe has been put there سَخَّرَ لَكُمْ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ, so that it's a sign for you, so that everything brings you back to Allah. This is that second legacy. But still, Prophet Ibrahim wants that miracle. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, but you've already believed. Why do you need more miracles? Yes? So he says, what can I do? I am a human, I still want it. I just want one more. And this is something that Bani Israel continuously asked for. This is something that we always ask for. But what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give him as a reply? This is what's interesting. He says, قَالَ فَخُذْ أَرْبَعَةً مِنَ الطَّيْرِ. And go and take from amongst birds 4. Take 4 birds. Pets, basically. 4 pet birds. And this is from amongst the sunnah of the Anbiya and the A'imma. And as well, by the way, many of our Maraja have pet birds. I'm not ashamed to say that I have 2 very cute birds at home too. So anyway, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so I'm by the way following the sunnah of Prophet Ibrahim by having pet birds. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. By the way, when Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam is leaving on the 19th of Ramadan towards Masjid al-Kufa, aren't there birds gifted to Imam al-Hussein and Imam al-Hassan? Swans or ducks, and they're flapping their wings in agony. Please, Mawla, don't go towards that Fajr prayer. Birds are in the house of our A'immah, are they in our houses? It's just one more thing to show that I want to just, whatever the wisdom is, I want it. Whatever the wisdom is of them having birds, I want that wisdom too. So anyway, قَالَ فَخُذْ أَرْبَعَةً مِنَ الطَّيْرِ فَصُرْهُنَّ إِلَيْكَ. Here is the part of the ayah that I didn't translate. And this is crucial. Because the way how we translate this depicts everything. Surhunna can be used to be translated as slice them up, butcher them. It can be. But it can also be used to say train them. Surhunna ilayka. Ilayka, how do you cut them up towards you? It doesn't make sense. Surhunna ilayka, train them towards you. Sure, that makes sense. ثُمَّ جَعَلْ عَلَى كُلِّ جَبَلٍ مِّنْهُنَّ جُزْءًا. Then put each bird onto a mountain. Not chopped up. Each bird is still alive. They've just been trained by Nabi Ibrahim. Birds, and I can say this, one of the reasons why I actually got a bird was just to go and see if I can test this out right here. Birds will treat you, forgive the analogy, like a god. Because you give them food, you give them water, you give them housing, you give them shelter. You're much bigger than them. When birds start to respect your authority, and you can pull up any YouTube video that you want of free flight. There are many trainers that will go just into an open field. They'll just let them go and make rounds, half a mile sometimes even. They'll just make a whole entire round trip in the open skies, and then they'll come and sit down on your finger. Small birds to big birds. Because they respect that authority. They've been trained that this is the one who feeds me, I need to come back to him. This is not just random tidbits and facts about birds, by the way. This is tafsir of an ayah, so please pay close attention. It says, فَصُرْهُنَّ إِلَيْكَ ثُمَّ جَعَلْ عَلَى كُلِّ جَبَلٍ مِّنْهُنَّ جُزْءًا. One of them, put one of these birds each onto a mountain. Not heads on one mountain, wings on another mountain, feet. No, one bird here, one bird here, one bird here, one bird here. ثُمَّ دَعُوهُنَّ. Then call them. Meaning make the call that you usually make, that they're trained to respond to. يَأْتِينَكَ سَعْيًا. They will come to you flying quickly. They will come flying, rushing towards you. Why? Because they respect you. They've been trained to. Everybody following along so far? If we are, then let's show that with Allah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So now we see a very interesting ending to this ayah. وَعْلَمْ أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَزِيزٌ حَكِيمٌ. Okay. 2 very interesting names that Allah has described himself with at the end of this ayah in particular. Aziz and Hakim. Aziz can mean the one who has izzah, which is respect, which is honor, which is glory. And we already mentioned that birds have respect for the one who has authority. Right? But then there's Hakim. What does Hakim mean? He's wise. Why is he wise? Why is he describing himself as wise? Because of all of the ways that I could have responded to, hey, I want to see a miracle. There's wisdom in why I showed you this way. What's the wisdom? What did Prophet Ibrahim learn? He just got pet birds, he trained them, and then he called them back from far away mountains. What's the hikmah in this? The hikmah is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has had our souls prior to them even coming into this world. Our souls recognize the authority of Allah, such that when He says, "Irji'i ila rabbika radiyatan mardiyya," when He gives that command, and Malak al-Maut says, "Come," we go. And when we're dead, we still respect that authority of Allah, that if He says kun, we say, or we act out the fayakun. This is the hikmah of Allah teaching Prophet Ibrahim in this way. What's the mu'jiza over here? This is the second legacy, remember? The first legacy is mu'jizat. Many mu'jizas towards Bani Israel. But did it help Bani Israel? No. The second legacy is logic. Come to me with your aql. Look at birds. Look at the trees. Look at this and that. And come to me with this kind of understanding. Because honestly, what kind of miracles did Rasulullah come? He came with the Quran, which we proclaim loudly that it is the miracle of all miracles. But why is it a miracle? I don't know. This is something that even the mushriks of Quraysh, they could tell from the Arabic grammar, Ma hada kalam al-bashar. This is not something that a human being could have ever come up with. So a Muslim Arab at the time and a non-Muslim Arab at the time can see that this is superhuman. I, as a Muslim, who may or may not understand Arabic, I can't understand. Isn't that kind of sad that Abu Jahl and Abu Sufyan can recognize a miracle in the Quran, but I can't? This is why we need to have a much stronger relationship with the Quran. But secondly, maybe there's one other miracle. There's a few miracles, sure, physical, that Rasulullah did perform. Right? So for example, the splitting of the moon. Another one is when Salman al-Muhammadi, when he was being purchased, his former master said, I want this many palm trees in exchange for Salman. He says, okay, bring me some of the dates. Rasulullah says, bring me some of the dates from this tree. He instructs a couple of his sahaba, the exact number that the master of Salman, however many he asked for, let's say he asked for 40, let's say he asked for 50, brings 50 of his sahaba and says, come here. We're all going to eat one of these dates, save the seed, plant it right in front of you, and by the barakah of Rasulullah, each and every single one of them shot out of the ground as a fully formed tree. So yes, there are some miracles. But you tell me, were those early Muslims, the ones who gave their lives?
Look at the logo.
Louder salawat for the love of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam.
चलो निकलो बच्चों सर
Third for the master of our time, Imam Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman. So we're back. Shaitan tries to mess with the lovers of Ahlul Bayt when there's too many good points being made. But alhamdulillah, batteries are not too hard to come by. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Don't touch anything, okay? Please sit down.
So now when we come to Prophet Ibrahim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to teach him, this is the legacy that I prefer for you. You're better than this. Stop asking for miracles. Instead, start to look around at what I've already created. Everything I've created is a sign back to me. Everything is a sign that I'm here. I'm actually here. I'm a creator. Everything begs the question, who created this? Who could have made this so intricate that it connects with a different system? The system of the weather cycle of precipitation and condensation. All of that works in tandem with the ecosystem of the trees and this and that. If there were two gods, one of them would say, well, I want to honor my system, you make your system work for me. The other one would say, no, I worked hard on the sky and the rain and this and that. Make your trees work for me. And they would have gone to war. Like how Quran says. Why would one God say, okay, yeah, I'll obey what... Otherwise he's not all powerful. He's just a slave to this other one. When there's one God it shows. Because there's no ruptures between one system and the other. This is what Surah Al-Mulk is saying. فَارْجِعِ الْبَصَرَ. Right? Return your gaze back to the sky. Do you see anything off? It's all continuous, from night into day. From storm to clear skies. Everything is seamless. It points to one design. But this happens when we start to look for logical signs, creation signs, and stop asking Allah, Ya Allah, if you're there, spell my name in my language in a watermelon. I don't know how many times I've been forwarded emails and whatnot of I saw Jesus' face in a cheese sandwich. MashaAllah, this is how Allah communicates to us now? This is ludicrous. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the mind of all minds. He is highly, highly complex. He wants you to step up your game a little bit. Not to ask for, Allah, if you're really here, that stool over there, make it just tip over a little bit, please. I'll believe in you, I'll do it. Then 5 minutes later, what does he want? He's like, no, that was a fluke. Do it again. Allah is now a magician at a party or something like that. He's just here, okay, what next? What next? This is not how we think of Allah. Hasha.
It's not new.
And yet, with so few physical miracles, there is an actual miracle that is convincing the minds and hearts of the people of that time, such that sons are going to war against their fathers, nephews against their uncles.
And you are going
Is that Abu Lahab,
if you
the father or the uncle of Rasulullah Imam Ali alayhi salam? Yet he's willing to, instead of just make something that's a little bit more eloquent than the Quran. You Arabs are the peak of Arabic eloquence. Make something like, use your pen. Why do you have to use the sword? Why do you have to resort to boycotts? Something was so overpowering when Allah speaks and you want to stick to your ways. There is no other way other than the sword. Something was so powerful that Rasulullah's ummah was able to be loyal, more loyal at least than Bani Israel. And that is a testament to that second legacy of Prophet Ibrahim, if this legacy is accepted. This is the Prophet Ibrahim, who is the father of Islam. Islam is not going to offer you miracles where, this year or that year you'll become a millionaire. No, in fact, try walking in the footsteps of the Imams. Those who were the most beloved to Allah had the hardest of all trials. And Imam Ali alayhi salam even says that those who come in my path, be ready for many fitna and
it looks like a turkey.
It's a difficult
Where did
test.
you get that head from?
And if you're not
That balloon
equipped,
from?
then I don't know what your sons and daughters are going to do. Because when they come, and they will come,
You're the
with
girlfriend.
difficult
You're
questions
the boyfriend.
about theology,
I am him.
about nubuwah, about imamah,
To my mom.
about what we just did today, this walk. Why are we walking? What's the point of this walk?
Let's go to your mom. Let's go to your mom.
Are we not doing too much for the ta'zeem of Imam al-Hussein? Why don't we do this for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for example? Why are we going overboard when it comes to Imam Hussein? Why? If we're not equipped with answers, if we, and I get it, many of our generations have just been raised in households where, hey, I never asked that to my father and mother. Why are you asking me that question? And we might have gotten punished. We might have been pushed away from our parents, or by our parents. Simply because they didn't know. It's not their fault. But now, this is where we break that wheel, we break that continuum, and we actually say to Allah, I want to know what your book says. I want to know how you
I was back.
come to my level and explain it to me using the aql that you have honored me with. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We've given them aql, we've given them fadila over the rest of creation. Okay, Ya Allah, I'm ready. Let me see what you have to say. That comes from the heart. It can't come from a parent. It can't come from a Sunday school. It can't come from a Maulana sitting on the minbar of Imam Hussein alayhi salam.
Look at that face.
It has to come from
Look
within.
at the logo.
Because I'll tell you what, Sahib Zaman, when he comes back, Sallu ala Muhammad wa alihi. He's not going to light the sky with miracles. Yes, we know that there is one person known as the Khurasani who leads the Khurasan region. He is going to be of the Muhaddin of Ahlul Bayt. But he's like, how do I know this is the true Mahdi? Be a claimant. And so there are specific mu'jizat that he will be looking for and that Sahib al-Zaman will give him. Okay, that is because he is in control of a huge area. Makes sense. For the rest of us, do you know, we have a
Run
hadith,
from away.
which I was
Who is it?
very, surprised to learn from my
Where did you
teachers.
get that?
That Sahib al-Zaman, when he comes back, will
I
speak
never seen that.
fluently
Is it in the floor?
to the people of Sin. Where's Sin? China.
Is it?
Fluently
Is
to
it?
them
Is
for
it?
10 minutes.
Is
After
it?
which the entire country of China will become lovers of Ahlul Bayt. What is China right now? Probably the world's biggest repository of
About this
atheism.
one? No, I don't want to
Because
see
of
that.
communism, Mao, all of these phenomena that have turned them into atheists, as well as the advent of modern science and technology. Atheism is rampant over there. Yet, when Sahib al-Zaman talks to them for 10 minutes, you tell me, is he casting a spell over them? Or is he speaking sense to them? He's clearing up their misconceptions and he's answering them where they need it most with pure, fluent Mandarin or Cantonese or whatever, maybe even some home dialects. And they say, wow, who is this Arab-looking person that he's speaking flawless Chinese? And he's making so much sense. This is the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When he would speak, he had the akhlaq and he had the sense. Look, doesn't it make sense? Stop burying your baby daughters. Oh wow, that makes so much sense. Be kind to your parents. Don't lie, don't cheat. These aren't magical words. And yet, what was the reaction of many of the Quraysh? If someone comes from out of town, oh, this Muhammad Sahir, Majnoon, he's this. Take these little cotton puffs, put them in your ear, and make sure you don't listen to a word he says while you're going tawaf around the Kaaba. The pagans also used to do tawaf, by the way. But someone says, my people, when I go back to them, they'll laugh at me if I just come back and I don't have any news of what he was saying. What, you were too chicken to listen to them? You could have at least listened to him. You could, use your mind. He takes out the cotton pieces. He listens to what Rasulullah has to say from the steps of the Kaaba. And it just makes sense. He's crying. He goes up to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he asks, how do I become a Muslim? He says, you recite after me, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. He says, is there any chance that from our tribe, maybe successors, maybe we could be your successors? He says, why are you trying to enter the religion with conditions? Are you not convinced? He says, yes, but we want to know that by giving our support to you, we will be also looked after. He says, my successorship is completely up to Allah. He doesn't want to tell them who the actual successor will be, and then he's like, okay, well, my chances here are done. Yes, some hope. He comes into Islam, and then when Allah wants to make it known to everybody, He will, in due time. The successorship is chosen by Allah, not by Rasulullah, as great as he is. And that's why when we look at this family of Ahlul Bayt, when they are trying their best to speak to us, to reason with us, if we could turn on the lights on. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I mentioned this before when I came here last time, but I'll mention it again. فَذَكِّرْ إِن نَفْعَتِ الذِّكْرَى. If the reminder has benefit, mention it. When Imam Rida alayhi salam was on his way to Marv, he stopped in a place called Naishapur. And in Naishapur, he was riding high in a carriage where there was a curtain. And tens of thousands, maybe even a few 100,000, had come from multiple countries to come and see the Imam of their time, Ali ibn Musa. And they're asking him, they're begging him, they're pleading with him, please remove the curtain so that we can just see your blessed face. And he says to his helper, his servant, remove the curtain so that they can see. People are screaming when they see the face of Imam Rida alayhi salam. People are fainting and they have to be carried away by their family members. Of the beauty of Imam Rida alayhi salam, of the jalal and the nobility of Imam Rida's face. He says, close the curtain now, let's walk, let's continue on our journey. They stop him again, they ask again, please, give us a hadith from your beloved grandfather, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He tells them, uncover the curtain. And he says, my father Musa ibn Ja'far told me. And his father Ja'far ibn Muhammad told him. And his father Muhammad ibn Ali told him. And his father Ali ibn al-Husayn told him. And his father Husayn ibn Ali told him. And his brother Hassan ibn Ali told him. And his father Ali ibn Abi Talib told him. And his cousin, his master, Muhammad ibn Abdullah told him. And Jibreel told him. And Allah told Jibreel. Kalimatu la ilaha illallah hasni. That the words la ilaha illallah are my fortress. Whoever enters my fortress is safe from my adab. Then Imam Rida says, close the curtain, let us keep walking. 100,000 people wrote down this hadith with its chain. He stops the camel again. He says, uncover the curtain. And he says to them, بِشَرْطِهَا وَشُرُوطِهَا, with its terms and conditions. He stops, he asks the camel rider, move again. And he stops again, and he tells them, and I am among those conditions. Brothers and sisters, when you have 100,000 or more people who are willing to listen and come with notebooks and write down what the blessed grandson of Rasulullah ﷺ has to say, then what about the one who heard it directly from Rasulullah's lips, Imam al-Husayn? When he enters Karbala, he is crying, he's saying, these people will all go to hell because of me. How many speeches did he give them, trying to convince them logically? Think about this. Is there any other grandson on the face of the earth of a prophet that you have other than me? Why are you so intent on doing this?
Oy.
He tries and tries, but what do they have as response to him? Just keep on making noise. Make loud noise so that nobody can hear what he has to say. Otherwise, if people hear what he has to say, they will join his side. And many did join. Now think of Imam Zain al-Abidin in the aftermath, knowing that his blessed family tree is one that is scholarly, is one that thrives on this kind of hidayah for the people. What did they do such that they should be brutally treated this way on the plains of Karbala? When Imam Zain al-Abidin was in Kufa, 3 days had passed and the burial of his father had to take place. And so Imam Sajjad used something that is called Tay al-Ard, what we might call today as a wormhole. And he travels immediately from Kufa in one step, and in Karbala he's there at the next step. And he finds Banu Asad and their children playing with the sand. So many deserted bodies, all left alone in the plains of Karbala. Not one of them has been given the dignity of a shroud. No one even gave them a kafan. They just ran with the heads and went and paraded the family and the heads throughout the Muslim realms. Brothers and sisters, take your time today to cry. We're going to be going through so many of the musibahs of Ahlul Bayt. We're going to be reading what Sahib al-Zaman himself describes of what happened to this pious grandfather of his, Imam al-Hussein. Take your time, take a deep breath and cry your heart out. I know you won't be able to in the quantity that Imam Sajjad was able to after Karbala, but try. When he came to the holy land of Karbala, Banu Asad saw him picking up something and they couldn't tell what it was. One of the men of Banu Asad came and approached him. Ibn Rasulullah, what was that object that you picked up off the floor and you kissed it and you kept it in your pocket? He says, this was the finger of my father Hussein. There was a ring he used to wear and the enemies of Allah couldn't take it off, so they severed the finger itself. Then he takes the body of Ali al-Asghar and the body of Imam al-Hussein, cries out to him, the baby, put the baby on my chest. That's the one that still hurts me the most. Now Imam al-Sajjad slowly starts to take the arrows out of his father's body. But the one that hurts him the most is the arrow he has to take out of his brother Ali al-Asghar. He then places this body on his father's chest. And he says, this grave will be consisted of my father and my two brothers, Ali al-Akbar and Ali al-Asghar. Remember, at this point, Imam Sajjad does not have the heads. In the burial process of any Muslim, the head is turned towards the Qibla. Meaning when he comes back on the 40th, and he has all of the heads with him, he has to dig up all of the graves all over again and place each head with each body. Look, I don't have the energy to even continue. This is heavy things. How Imam Zain al-Abidin was able to not only live and see this is beyond me. He says, my father had a special respect for Habib ibn Madahir. Give him his own grave. The rest of the companions will have their own grave. But then Banu Asad come and say to him, there is one more body. We found it by the Furat. When we tried to pick up the right side, the left side is in total shambles. When we try to pick up the left side, the entire right side starts falling apart. Who was this soldier that the enemies had so much animosity for that they cut him into pieces and pieces? It says, this was Qamar Bani Hashim, my uncle Abbas. He takes the right hand of Abu Fadl al-Abbas. He takes the left hand of Abu Fadl al-Abbas. He then walks his way towards the Furat. And he extracts. Brothers and sisters, this is difficult. His body was already smashed into pieces because of the iron rod, but there was still one spear piercing through his back. Imam Sajjad asks for help. He says, I cannot do this alone. Help me, O men of Banu Asad. And with their help, he takes out the spear from Abu Fadl al-Abbas's back. If you think this is where it ends for Imam Sajjad, you're sadly mistaken. Then he goes back to Kufa and he sees that his aunties are all being paraded through the streets of Kufa like commoners. Some of them have had their hijabs burned off, some of them have had them pulled off. And they are being allowed to be seen by the men of Kufa. Imam al-Hussein, no matter how much he had to go through, he didn't have to see his women without hijab. But Imam Zayn al-Abidin had to have the patience where now he has to see his women and his children be beaten and be beaten and be humiliated by the entire Muslim Ummah. But then it gets even worse when he has to see his sister cry herself to sleep at night until one mal'oon named Yazid says, I cannot take it anymore. I cannot sleep. What does this girl want? The guards say she misses her father. Says, then give her the father's head. They deliver the head of the father on a silver platter. When this young 3 or 4-year-old girl named Ruqayya sees her father's head, she starts to clean it of the blood on his head. She starts to nurse all of his wounds and take care of his teeth, because those same teeth that Rasulullah would kiss had been beaten by an oppressive stick. In her grief, this young girl ends up dying over the head of her father, and Imam Zayn al-Abidin has to now perform the janazah of a young 3 or 4-year-old girl. Brothers and sisters, the ziyarah of this young girl in Sham is a heavy one, because when you look at the size, especially if you go in the basement, and this is something that if you're ever honored to go into the basement of Abu Fadl Abbas, you'll also see, may Allah never show you how small the grave of Abu Fadl Abbas is. When you see how small that box is, you remember that they used to say that when Abu Fadl Abbas used to ride on the horse, his legs would dangle. He was so tall. He was taller than Imam al-Hussein. Why is he so small now? It's because the enemies of Allah wanted to take out their frustration on this warrior and tore everything that they could into pieces. Ya Abbas, Ya Abbas, Ya Abbas. So that when Imam Zayn al-Abidin now has to lead the janazah on this young girl, Rabab is now starting to go and give the ghusl for this young girl. And she comes, my son Sajjad, why is the hair of this girl coming out? I know why her skin is purple and blue. It's because Shimr was kicking and slapping her. Why is her hair coming out? I am young, my hair is not coming out. Imam Sajjad finds out from the divine source. He says, this is because Allah has informed me that when Shimr would go and slap her, just like he did with Imam al-Hussein, he tore his hair. When he was slaughtering Imam al-Hussein, he's tore the hair out of my sister Ruqayya. And then when he was holding her in this state, he would slap her from her right and her left. Brothers and sisters, I'd like to take this time right now to show you what our Imam of the time, Sahib al-Asri wal-Zaman, has written towards his great-grandfather, Abi Abdullah al-Hussein. The following is from Ziyarat al-Nahiyat al-Muqaddasa. Imam Sahib al-Zaman says, Oh Shia of Abu Abdullah, I don't know how I will recite this, I don't know how you will take this. I'm going to recite it slowly in English so that everybody understands. This is what your Imam has to say towards Imam al-Hussein. Peace be upon the one who was killed unjustly. Peace be upon your brother Imam Hassan who was poisoned to death. Peace be upon Ali al-Akbar. Peace be upon that suckling young one. Peace be upon the bodies that were hung in the streets after they were killed. I ask Imam Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman, all of them were beheaded. With what neck were they held up with on the stone? Peace be upon the nearest of the Prophet's progeny. Peace be upon the corpses that were abandoned in the desert. Peace be upon those travelers who were driven out from their homes. Peace be upon those who were buried without their shrouds. And they were left in their for anybody to see. For all the animals, for all of the jinn, everybody to just come and see. Peace be upon the one whom Jibreel and Mikael put to sleep in the cradle. Peace be upon those who, about them the oaths were broken, those whose dignity was lowered, those whose blood was shed unjustly, those who were bathed in the blood of their own wounds, those who were attacked by the enemy from all sides. Peace be upon the one who was inflicted with every kind of atrocity, the one who was the killer surrounded and scared. Peace be upon the one who was buried by the villagers. Where is the rest of the Ummah, brothers and sisters? Where are they for their Imam? Even in burial, they do not comfort. Peace be upon the one whose jugular vein was severed with cruelty. Peace be upon who was left all alone to defend his family against all the enemies. Peace be upon the one whose hair was dyed red in his own blood. Peace be upon those blood-smeared cheeks. Peace be upon that dust-smeared body. Peace be upon the teeth that were hit with an oppressive baton by Yazid and by Ibn Ziyad. Peace be upon that glorified head that was put up on a spear, upon those corpses that lay uncovered. There's only one more part, brothers and sisters. No one can cry like Imam al-Hussein. Take a deep breath. No one can cry like Imam Zain al-Abidin. For 34 years, all he does is try to guide the Ummah with his du'as and Sahifa Sajjadiyah. And just like that, his great-grandson, Sahib al-Zaman, cries tears of blood in this ziyarah. But he tries to guide us so that we have one glimpse into what happened in Karbala. But still, Imam al-Baqir says, if our Shia were to know what truly happened to us in Karbala, they would die out of grief. Meaning everything that we are being told is just a fraction. Everything you've ever heard, everything you've ever seen in a video or a play is just a fraction of what Imam Sahib al-Zaman has to witness every year in Ashura. He says, you strove to go and fight, such that Zulfiqar, when it came out of its sheath, the enemy saw Ali ibn Abi Talib on the battlefield. And when they saw that you were resolute in killing, and you were not going to be dissuaded, they started their plots and their trickery against you. So that when you had gone towards the river, they went towards your tents. So that even when you had a chance to go and drink the water, Abu Fadl Abbas died without drinking the water because he wanted his brother Hussein to drink. But when he finally had the chance, what happened? They start screaming, what kind of man are you, Hussein? You enjoy the Furat while we enjoy your women? Imam Hussein ran back, and this would be the final time that his family would see him. He says, and you were surrounded in the dust of the battle and fighting with Zulfiqar with so much ferocity as if Ali himself was fighting. So when the enemies saw you, fearless and resolute, they began to plot and lay traps for you, and they began to fight you with the cunning and mischief. And the accursed Umar ibn Sa'ad ordered his army to cut off the water supply. All of them had unsheathed their swords towards you. They did not take into consideration their duties towards you. How great was their sin of plundering your belongings. You were bearing the tribulations of the battle with so much patience that even the angels of the sky were astonished. What kind of patience is Hussein showing? We have never seen such patience before. It says, then the enemy surrounded you from all sides. O Shia of Abu Abdullah, if it was not written by the Imam of your time, I would not make you relive those tragic moments of the end of Imam Hussein's life. They began to give you one injury after another and make you fatigued. No helper remained between you and your women and children. You were still deflecting the crowd of attackers with persistence and patience, so that your women and children would not be scared. Until they forced you off of your horse, and when you descended to the earth wounded, the horses were trampling you with their hooves. And then one by one they each come and attack you with their swords. Once the sweat of death had appeared on your forehead, and your hands and feet were unfolding and folding from your right and left, you were cradling your wounds, and each child that came to hug you, you were hugging them as well. I would have never thought, this is Imam al-Zaman saying to Imam Hussein, I would have never thought that you would have had so much thought for your children and family, even in this such severe pain. And at this time your horse, Zuljana, galloped towards your camp. It was weeping and neighing, and when the ladies saw that they were riderless, they came out and they became restless. And they were crying and they were slapping their faces and they started calling every one of their holy ancestors and elders without restriction, please help us. Where are you, Ya Rasulullah? Where are you, Ya Hamza? Where are you, Ya Ali? They all headed towards your place of slaughter, and Imam says, what a pity. They all witnessed what was about to happen next. 2 more sentences, brothers and sisters. Forgive me if I've gone over time. Then at that time, the accursed Shimr ibn Dhil-Jawshan was sitting on your chest, and he was moving his sword upon your neck as he held your hair with his hand. And he was slaughtering you in this way with his sword. You had become motionless, and your breathing was about to stop. Ya Hussein, until the time you were beheaded and your head was raised up on the sword. And after this, the women were arrested like slaves and tied up with heavy iron chains and made to sit on camels. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. Raise your hands, brothers and sisters, for this is the night of Arbaeen. On such nights, hajat are fulfilled, our sick are cured. Let us recite the holy ayah together 5 times. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Everybody together. أما يجيب أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه أما يجيب اللهم إنا نسألك وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأكرم الأجل 10 times يا الله 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 اللهم بفاطمة وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها والسر المستودع فيها اكشف عنا السوء يا الله اللهم اغفر ذنوبنا كفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار يا الله مع محمد وآله الأطهار يا الله اللهم بباب الحوائج وبإمام الحسين اقضي حوائج المؤمنين والمؤمنات شاف وعافي مرضى المؤمنين والمؤمنات على الخصوص من أوصانا بالدعاء منهم يا الله اللهم اغفر ذنوبنا كفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار ولتعجيل مولى صاحب العصر والزمان نقرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.